Hello, everyone, and welcome in. We are just 2 days away from game day. Georgia Tech takes on Florida State in Dublin, Ireland. We welcome you into Swarm Talk, the show with all things you need to know about the Yellow Jackets. Let's get ready to rock and roll. Let's talk college football. Let's talk Georgia Tech, Florida State for about the 17th time this week. It's Swarm Talk here on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Welcome in. Welcome in. Section 103, the presenting sponsor of our Georgia Tech talk show here on the Crowded Booth, where we've been talking about this game. It's kind of the really only notable game of the weekend. SMU does go to Nevada. That line is around minus 24.5, I believe. But this is the big one. And this is the one where I think a lot of people have had some interesting conversation. We had an interesting show last night that's doing well in the view count. Would not say it went the way that I wanted it to in terms of the content we had planned. So we'll carry that over tonight. Also, unless you're living under a rock, we have got a very special guest picker tonight that we'll get to a little bit later on. It has to do with mini helmets, and it's going to be a lot of fun for you to hear from this person the expertise and analysis that they're going to bring to this channel this season. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you like the video wherever you're watching, whether it's on X. Head over to our YouTube channel, but make sure to follow us on X as well. You know, we talked about this game last night on our college football show. And I will tell you, this week has been a great week for content in terms of talking about games, stopping talking about hypotheticals, and really just kind of getting into this mode of, okay, we're here. Let's talk about, so and so, did this last year. So and so brought this amount of production back. We're starting to get into, and obviously on Saturday, we're going to have a chance to really talk about and recap actual data points for the 2024 season. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really fun to watch this game. Popular to contrary belief, I do hope Georgia Tech wins this football game. But I'm also never going to completely sunshine pump when I don't think there should be sunshine pumping. So let's kind of dive in. So last night we were having a conversation, and I wanted to apologize because we did get a couple comments that said I was hoping to tune into a good show, and it kind of got taken over, by certain aspects and things like that. And you know what? Hand up, apologies. That's on me. Hope that we didn't ruin your night. That's why we're doing this tonight as well. But we had a great interview early in the week. Once again, if you're watching or listening to this, with Bud Elliott, obviously 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports, national college football podcaster and writer. But he comes from the Florida State background, still has his podcast, the Nolecast. They did a great job of just kind of diving into what Florida State can expect for this game. And he hopped on the show, and one of our most watched shows of the year too. So that was a lot of fun. Make sure you check out that content if you haven't already. But let's dive in. This game has been the hype and talk around this game. We're reaching a point of where it's just being absolutely beaten to a pulp. There's a lot of things that you can look at in this contest. You can dissect the percentage of snaps returning. You can dissect all of these different things. You can look at team rankings. You can look at, player rankings and where they were recruited. And Florida State has a lot of new faces while Georgia Tech brings back, continuity. And the thing that I've continuously heard over and over again, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is something where, I feel like Georgia Tech fans have kind of settled in on this being the big defense when prognosticators, media members, and, podcasters will sit there and tell you that, well, Florida State's going to win this game. And there's been a consensus that a lot of people think that, nationally, that Florida State should win this game fairly easily. So what is the big defense? Like, what is the big argument in defense of why Georgia Tech should win the game? So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to lay out 3 keys to a victory, which I think Georgia Tech has to mark off all 3 of these, and then I'll get into my final prediction. The defense from the Georgia Tech faithful has been, in my opinion, they have a brand new roster. They've got brand new guys that have never played with each other. We don't. We've got pieces, but the core, the nucleus of what we're bringing to the table is largely the same. And there's truth to that. There is truth to that. That is not a false statement by any stretch of the imagination. Where I think it's lost upon me is the guys that Florida State brought in aren't bad football players. And if Mike Norvell is going to be the coach that everyone thinks he is, and I kind of think he is, he's going to have this group ready to play. So continuity is a major thing. It's kind of a rare thing, and that's one of the cool storylines about Georgia Tech this offseason is that, hey, you had some great roster retention in terms of bringing guys back, not letting them hit the portal, and you're hoping and counting on a lot of internal development, especially on that defensive side of the football. And yeah, you brought in some players, but I've seen some comments, I've seen some things, and I think the biggest thing that I think we should look at and ask for in general is just continuity in the debate. Let's have continuity for the debate. Let's if we're going to say one point in favor of our favorite team, and I'm not meaning my favorite team, but any sports fan ever, that concept, that idea that you're trying to prove can also be used against you or your opposition. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. I think that is I want to be careful in how I say it. I don't not necessarily that it's lost on everybody, but certain of the comments and the things that are pointed out, I kind of sit here and say, well, it works for that argument, but you've also got to allow it to work for this argument as well. So that's just kind of one of the things I've kind of teetered on. And look, people are going to fans are fanatics, and I think I want to get this out of the way. Nobody, nobody, and I'll speak for myself. No, I have not once tried to tell anyone why they shouldn't be excited for this season. There should be a level of excitement for this season. This program has found life. It has been, it has reawakened from the dead. It felt like. I mean, it was bad, and now it's you're back on. You feel like a foundation that you can build upon. Those are reasons for excitement. Where I sit in this talking in this Georgia Tech talk sphere or whatever you want to call it is there are tons of positives. We talked about that when we did our positional previews. There are also, I would say, holes, questions, question marks that nobody can really answer, but that are probably worth bringing up. Now, nobody can answer them because we don't have any data points unless you are in the locker room or a member of the team. Not one media member, not one, um, outside media source unless you are in that building, there's no really real way to gauge it. And look, people like to think that there's certain avenues that they can get that information. Everybody looks good in fall camp. Everybody is trending up. There's very few fall camps where you get into a press conference and people aren't saying that they're excited or they're looking forward to or that we're working towards and we're doing these type of things. But I think that I think that when we look at this, we need to just be honest with ourselves. There's reason for excitement about Georgia Tech in 2024. Let's all be pumped. This is an offense. This is an offense that could be top 15, top 20 in the country if things click their way and trend correctly. This is also a defense that there's a lot of questions, and I feel like there's been a lot of assumption of, well, it's just all going to be okay. And yeah, that can be true to a certain extent, but my thing is we need to see some things answered. And fans are going to fan in a different way. And I don't want to tell anyone how to fan. I just think we need to be completely educated. And maybe that's too high of a bar for people to, some people on social media to be able to adhere to. Let's have educated, logical arguments. I'm all for sports debate. I'd love for people to tell me why I'm wrong. You have to make sense. It can't just be off of well, this is what I think. Because you don't know. Now you could argue I don't know that as well. That's why I'm pitching it. This is what I believe, not that this is a fact. So that for me is just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm excited about this season. I'm excited to see what happens on Saturday. I do believe there is a way that's not some mythical way that a lot of people have portrayed it as that Georgia Tech can win this football game. I don't think that's a far-fetched concept. I don't. I would say the scenario where Florida State blows them out, I don't believe is as prevalent as a lot of people make it. Could it happen? Yeah, anything can happen on Saturday. That would bust a lot of the conversation that's happened, not just on this channel, but national media channels, because there's a lot of focus on this game. So that for me is one of those things. So I think it's interesting just to kind of have that conversation to get that out of the way. Let's have educated debate. Let's let's be smart with how we're forming our opinions, backing it with facts, but also understanding that you can use statistics, you can use facts, and there's always going to be outliers. Truly, we don't know. And we'll start to be able to gather some of the data points here in 2024. So I think that's important. That's all I kind of wanted to say with that. Now we get into, just honestly, and I'm gonna type this out real quick for everyone. Yeah, I'm typing in the middle of the live show. Lock it in, subscribe to the channel. There's a way that Georgia Tech wins this game. There is a path to where Georgia Tech can win this game. I've got 3 keys that I feel like need to stand out, but I wanted to talk first a little bit more about this. Well, let's just go into it. Let's just go into it because the first point is talking more about it. Ralph, let's hit up point number 1. This is key number 1. Make DJU uncomfortable. And not in the biblical sense. This is more of this idea that DJU is complete garbage. It kind of I don't know. I really, and I think this is why I got frustrated last night, because I can't stand when people just say that these guys are just awful. Like, that's not a real take. You can be trolling and that's fine. But this idea that he's completely terrible, like, he may not play well on Saturday. He might not be good this year for Florida State. But for me, I think that this is a guy who at his worst is going to be about an average quarterback. He's not going to be super explosive and this would be at the average. He might not be super explosive. He might not be able to consistently, make the down the field passes. And I mentioned this on Sunday when we did the show to kind of take an early look at this game. He might be a guy that you can't rely to throw on 30, 35, 40 passes a game. I don't think Florida State's going to want him to do that anyways. That's not how this team is built. That's not how this team is necessarily going to run things. I think that's pretty much a common idea, and we'll see on Saturday what it looks like. But I'll tell you when DJU's dangerous is he's slimmed down. He's around 240, 235, 240. He is a threat to run with the football. Now, it's going to come back. He's not Haynes King. Okay. He's not Jaden Daniels. Okay. He's still a threat in his own way to run with the football. Quarterback draw, quarterback blast. He's going to be able to do some things with the football. Also, I think this too is any quarterback is going to look good if you don't get a pass rush on them. And it's so important for Georgia Tech to come in this game and make him uncomfortable from the get-go. Because I think that while I don't believe that he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, I do think that he is a guy that, as like a lot of guys, that if you give him some time and you allow him to get into a rhythm over the course of the first and second quarter, it's going to build his confidence. Now, the reports out of FSU's camp is that he has looked good. They're excited about what he has been for them. So I just think that when we sit here and we talk about DJU, is you can't let him get comfortable for long. You can't allow him to progress through his reads. You really can't let him beat you. If he starts to beat you in this game, that's the scenario where I think this becomes a blowout. That's the scenario where I think that you could start to see is for me. That's the scenario for me where I start to see this game could get ugly, because I think they'll be able to run the football. Their receivers, it's a lot of unproven guys. It's not, and they don't have a Keon Coleman in that room. They don't have a Johnny Wilson. They don't have a Jaheim Bell. They've got some dudes, but we'll see if they realize that potential in this football game. But if you allow him to start slinging the ball around the yard, which he has the ability to do, it's not that he has the ability to make that happen. Has he necessarily realized it yet on a consistent basis in the ACC? No, He did a pretty good job of that last year at Oregon State. So I just feel like that we sit here with a scenario of, okay, if he gets rolling, it's going to put this defense on its heels, who I think is going to have to really key in more on the run game in general. If they can play balanced offensively, that's a bad sign. That would be a bad sign. So the key is you have to get him rattled. You've got to force him into some tough decisions. You've got to make him get rid of the ball quickly, not allow him to progress those reads, and you need to get some licks on him. Like we've mentioned, this is a big guy. This is a guy who isn't afraid of contact. We're going to need to see how revamped this defensive line, this front seven is in getting after the quarterback. So I think that's got to be point number one. Because if you can start to do that, then they're going to have to run the football, but you and everyone in that stadium and watching knows that they have to run the football. And that's a completely different story and a big question mark for me. Can you still stop them if you know they got to run the football? We'll see. That's going to have to be one of the questions answered during the game. But if you allow them to be balanced here, you allow him to toss the ball around a little bit, get a little swagger, start feeling himself a little bit in terms of, hey, I'm back in the ACC, all these questions, because there's pressure on him. Like, there's no doubt that there's pressure for him to follow a great college quarterback in Jordan Travis, continue this, this run for Florida State where they have been, continuously building up the ACC in the national profile in the rankings. There's pressure in that, and for him personally. I mean, this is a guy who was a 5-star talent coming out of high school. He was at Clemson. He flashed. He faltered. He flashed. He faltered. He ends up losing the job. Moves over to Oregon State. Has a little bit of a renaissance year out there. Is able to kind of find himself again. But now he comes back to the ACC. He's back in that pressure cooker of being a part of a team that's perceived as a national contender and a national brand. How does he handle it? Well, Georgia Tech's job has got to be able to. You got to knock him off the seat really quickly. And so that's why we'll have to see how this, Tyler Santucci and this group want to get after it. Do they want to get exotic with the blitz packages? Do they want to try to confuse him early on? He's a smart football player. If you let him sit in the pocket, he will pick you apart like anybody would. So that's my first key right there. Make him uncomfortable. Make him make decisions faster than he wants to. All right, let's move on to the second one here. Is limit explosive plays. This, to me, could be a backbreaker for the Georgia Tech defense. Whether it's on, and this kind of goes into what we're talking about with DJU here. If you allow too many explosive plays, the argument might be, well, that's the game that Georgia Tech wants to play. They want to play in a track meet because they offensively can match that. My thing is that I don't want to have to force my offense to match what Florida State does every single time they touch the football. We saw that happen last year in certain games, and it wasn't necessarily fun because when the offense blinked, which you can't get mad at them for because they're having to score every single time, it was a cause for concern. So now that you're kind of where you feel like the defense is in a better spot, I think it's not where they want it yet in terms of the personnel groupings and Santucci having the guys that he really wants. But I do think that when you look at this defense, the back end, you feel pretty good about. You cannot allow explosive plays. You can't allow for, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, and now they start moving in chunk plays down the field. So I think that if you can limit the explosive plays to a few here and there, it not only takes the wind out of the sails of the offense, it stops from the avalanche rolling, which a lot of people think could happen in this game. And like I mentioned, like if they're balanced, the avalanche could start. If they start hitting on explosive plays every 2 to 3, then defensively you're all over the place, and it's really hard for you to settle back in because you're on your heels. This running back room for Florida State, I think, could be an Achilles heel of this defense. We know that last year. We know this is not the same grouping. The problem is that your question is there enough internal development combined with the guys that you have that's going to make that much of a difference from last season along with the coaching? We'll see. No one knows that. And I'm going to tell you right now, if it happens on Saturday where Georgia Tech holds them to under 100 yards rushing, anyone who's telling you that they knew it is flat out lying. It's a guess that they lucked out on. Nobody can tell you that. So there's that in terms of the passing game. The run game, like I was mentioning, a concern could be here. They're going to hand it off, 4 yard gain here, hand it off 3, hand it off 5, hand it off 4, hand it off 4. And now they start to really beat you down and wear you down to where they pop off the 25, the 35, the 65-yard touchdown run. So you could say limit explosive plays goes hand in hand with creating chaos. And that's what Georgia Tech has, even in some seriously bad defensive years. That's what they have been able to, I would say, key in on, is they have been able to find that big momentum play. I think that you have to stack those. Just like you want to stack good days during fall practice, Georgia Tech defensively is going to have to stack good play after good play. Okay, it's 1st and 10, we force an incompletion. Boom, 2nd and 10. Let's move on to the next play. Okay, now it's 2nd and 10, and they only picked up 3 on a run. Okay, it's 3rd and 7. Let's get right into that. Stack some good plays, stack potentially good drives defensively to where, okay, now you sit in a situation where now you got some swagger and some confidence about you defensively. It could happen, but we'll have to see. I think that's a big thing in terms of limiting explosive plays and keeping the momentum on your side defensively. So that's key number 2. Let's go to key number 3. And Ralph, let's star some comments that you want to be featured in the show, and let's obviously don't star moronic ones. The offense has to be great. I think that, and this is just my kind of feeling, this defense is still a work in progress, and anyone would tell you that. I mean, it's game 1. I mean, there's no shot that you're gonna. It's very unlikely that you're a finished product at this point of the season. So I think that you need to lean on your strength. And the strength is that if this offense is going to be great, that's going to put pressure on Florida State's offense. We talked with Bud Elliott about this, and he said if you didn't look at the experience together in certain things, but you just kind of looked at the measurables, you looked at, just, and he does this, but you kind of looked at the talent composite. Like you started to kind of look at what makes these guys these guys. He said it would almost be a wash, maybe favor Florida State a little bit. But the problem is there's a ton of unknown pieces being able to, uh, being able to fit together. So you kind of sit there and you say, well, Georgia Tech has the edge. They've got the continuity factor, and that's their edge offensively. You got to lean into that. I mean, Buster Faulkner's going to have to call a great game. You're going to have to keep them. Uh, you're going to have to keep them on their toes. They are super fast defensively on the back end. That's going to be something where you're going to have to win on some one-on-ones. You're also going to have to get creative in the way that you draw up plays. I don't think this is a game where you can focus on one singular guy. And maybe that's a good thing for this matchup because I've mentioned AZ Thomas, he's really, really good. Fentrell Cypress, they believe that that's the Fentrell Cypress from 2 years ago when he was very, very good. So I think that when you look at this game offensively, if you can click and you're scoring just about every single time you get the football, and I know Ralph and Will in the background, I don't know what the average possessions per game are. I don't know where we could look that up. I don't know if that's something that you can just find. Because it just came to my head and I didn't really think about it. But if you score on about 90% of the drives you have, 95% of the drives you have, maybe, that to me is a scenario of where you've put the pressure on them. You've put the stress on DJ's shoulders, and now we get to see what it is. Now, look, defensively for them, I think they are very, very good up front. I think that and this is when I don't think they have a Braden Fisk type in the middle, but I think that they've got 2 of the better defensive ends in the conference. And one of them is probably one of those guys that's probably going to pop off and be a top 50 pick at least. Patrick Payton, you're going to learn a lot about your tackles. Marvin Jones Jr., you're going to learn a lot about your tackles. How can you combo block those guys? How much help can you give your tackles when both of those guys are on the field? And when you do give them help with the running back position and Jamal Haynes, does that limit what you can do offensively because he's such a weapon out of the backfield? So I think that for me, the obvious thing, like Ralph said yesterday, there's a battle in the trenches to be won here. Offensively, you have to play. I think you're going to have to play with a little tempo, and you're going to have to see what you can get early on. You're going to have to, it's like two boxers kind of feeling each other out in the early rounds before it really kicks off. I think we could see that in this game because there are a lot of unknowns with both teams. But offensively, you know that you can be good. You know that you can put up, points. Can you do it against this defense? That's going to be the question. If you can score on this defense, like Georgia Tech scored at times last year and was able to be balanced at times last year in those good moments, if you have more of those good moments than you do bad, then you start to put pressure on Florida State offensively. And I don't know if that's the game that Mike Norvell and Florida State want to play. So that's what a wild comment. Dr. Bob says he's in my roof relighting a pilot light. Go Jackets. Good God. I know it is about 5,000 degrees in Baton Rouge right now, so that's not fun. So that's where we sit with this. This is going to be an interesting football game. This is going to be one where we have beat a dead horse talking about it. Here's your scenarios. Is Georgia Tech going to be able to answer the questions? If they can answer those questions, they're going to win the football game. If Florida State is what I think a lot of people think they are, probably including myself, then they might just be okay. And they might win this game. It might be a little closer than the experts think. Georgia Tech earns some respect regardless. I understand people don't like, those type of games, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. All right, it's prediction time. So there's our three keys. That's the three keys I think Georgia Tech has to hit on. You might have some more that you have dove into. But let's talk here. We had a big special guest hop on the show. We did have to pre-record it. We'll see what happens. Ralph, you've got that clip ready. We get to the final prediction. We do indeed have a guest picker. Ralph, run the clip. This is between Florida State and Georgia Tech. All right, the first official pick of college football season, the Ireland game, Georgia Tech and Florida State. We have our guest picker, Addie. Whichever one she makes contact with first is deemed the winner. A little bit of drool, but that's okay. She's eyeing. Ooh, which one does she like? Is mom swaying her one way or the other? She's leaning Georgia Tech. Leaning. Oh, it's the Jackets. Addie picks the Jackets to win. You want to talk about it post-game? Okay. Appreciate your comments. Now, you saw mom back there swaying back and forth, but the daughter has picked her week one pick. She goes with Georgia Tech. So that's a big prediction. That's a big one right there. She picks the Jackets, and I'm just glad mom wasn't wearing a Georgia shirt because I'd have had to hear that. She was wearing an LSU baseball shirt. All right, so that's Addie's pick for week 0. Let's roll into mine. We have talked about this a lot. Ralph and Will gave their picks last night. The line, and guys, you just nod in the background, is it still minus 10? Is it still 10-point favorite? I believe it might be. I don't believe it's moved down anymore. I will tell you this, and this was my best bet of the week, Dr. Bob. I believe you're in it. I love Georgia Tech plus 6.5 in the first half. I really like that. And Ralph is shaking his hands. Ralph, you're going to have to put that in the private chat because I cannot see what that says. John Burns says 10.5. Is that what we're still per bet online? Okay, so per betonline.ag, we're sitting at 10.5 still in this game. Look, I like Georgia Tech plus 6.5 in the first half. I think that this is a game where Georgia Tech's going to, I think Georgia Tech can start fast offensively. Get some points out there. I think Florida State will struggle out of the gate a little bit. I think that halftime is where you're going to see some adjustments made. And I think Mike Norvell is going to make those adjustments. I think that Florida State ends up with a backdoor cover of this game. I think that they do get the minus 10.5, but I don't think this is a blowout. I will say that I think the most likely outcome is around a 2-touchdown game. Let's say it's someone try to give me something here. Let's say it's a 31, 28 game or 30. I don't know. So it's we'll see. I'm trying to think here. Like what would be a regional scenario? It's a 31. I can't even do math right now, guys. It's a 34-28 game and they win 41-28. With a late touchdown to kind of ice things off. And I'm going to explain my pick because I think that people deserve that, and I think that, you know, let's just get that out there before we get out of here. The reason I'm picking Florida State in this one is, yes, there is a lot of new faces. There's a lot of all these different things. I feel more comfortable with what Mike Norvell and his group does than I do with what Georgia Tech has and can do with the defense. Offensively, I think Georgia Tech's going to be able to score a little bit. I think they'll make some adjustments. I think that it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch how these tackles handle both defensive ends, what the separation is like from the receivers in terms of this secondary that I think is very fast. But I I just think that this is a game where it's going to be back and forth close. I think Florida State wins with that backdoor cover at -10.5. But I will tell you this: I think Georgia Tech could win this game. I also think that they could win this game by 10.5. I think they could cover a -10.5. Ireland is such a weird game. You go back and look at the history of the games that we've seen here. Um, it's going to be very interesting to kind of watch that storyline. I will tell you this: the only thing that would shock me is if Florida State won this game like 45-17. Like if Florida State just went out there and dominated, because while I do think that they're good and I do have them in my playoff, I think that Georgia Tech is improved enough to not get blown out. So I think that bottom line, this is a game where the least likely scenario is getting blown out. The second scenario is Georgia Tech winning a close one, and to me, the most likely one is probably where Vegas has set it, covering under 10.5. Now, this is this is a good comment. Austin Biley does say the under looks enticing. Let's talk about that. The under, is it still at 55.5? Is that what we've been able to get it at over on betonline.ag? I could see that as well. I think that due to this being week 0, the travel aspect. I mean, Haynes King talked about it today, like you're still trying to get your footing a little bit and wrap your mind around, everything that's kind of going on. Where I could see this game going is kind of a low scoring battle, which in my opinion would favor a Florida State, because I think they're a grinded out team that can do a little bit more against Georgia Tech's front than I think that Georgia Tech could do against Florida State's front. I think that's also kind of a big pick. I trust Georgia Tech. I trust Florida State's offensive line more than I trust Georgia Tech's right now. Could change. We could be completely wrong. And like I said, I would like to see it. So that's my final prediction. I think Florida State is going to win this game. And we'll see. We'll kind of see what happens. I think I had this at 34 to like 23 in my preseason predictions. I'm going to stick by that. So a close backdoor cover, slow start, but I got 34-23 this one. We'll see what happens, though. Ireland could be interesting. It'd be surprising to me if this became a shootout. I don't think Florida State wants that at all. So it'll be fun to watch. It will be fun to watch. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And just kind of before we get out of here, over 200 people watching live. I was told no one watches this anymore. I don't know about you fellas. I was told about that. Hey, shout out to the Rivals message boards for putting us over there. We appreciate you sharing that content on your platforms. And look, sharing the show. Share with anybody. We enjoy talking college football. On Saturday at 11:55 Eastern Standard Time, we will be going live. We're doing an all-day watch party. Come join us. We're going to be hanging out, watching the game, giving our live reaction. I believe all three of us are going to be, at some point, we're going to be in there, and it'll be a lot of fun. But you know what? Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you. This is Swarm Talk, brought to you by Section 103. Over 200 people watching live on the platforms. We'll see you next time. This is Swarm Talk. Thanks so much.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce